All right. Welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining. Today's webinar is about multilingual projects. I have today Xanevo or Jan Kaiser representing Xanevo today, and my colleague Pachi.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself? Just as a quick intro.
Me or Jan?
Both.
You can start, Jan.
I can start. All right, thank you very much, Pachi. So, as Nyam already said, I'm representing Xanevo today. On today's topic is the multilingual projects, right? How to manage them, how to set up multilingual projects, and I'll be responsible for guiding you through a showcase and to show you how we've implemented an example project in English and German. My background is in data science and IT project management. It's also my responsibility at Xanevo besides being managing director.
I'm Pachi. I'm from AX Semantics, and I usually take care or are a part of the team when it comes to translation and translation projects, because I'm a translator myself. So I have experience in that, and that's because I'm always a part of the team when it comes to translation.
Which languages have you been translating to?
English, German, and then my mother language are Spanish and Galician.
Oh, okay, interesting. That's great. Yeah, I haven't been translating too much yet. I can probably keep up with Chinese as well. It's one of my mother languages as well. But besides that, we've been mostly focusing on German and English, right?
Okay, cool. Yeah. My name is Nyam. I'm part of the customer success team, doing onboardings to enable our customers to work with our tool, but also offering webinars, improving the system and collecting feedback and so on. Yeah. So we will just almost start right now. We have on the right side, there is a Q&A, so you can always write down your questions in between. We can check them and answer also whenever you have some questions.
Yes, exactly. So you will you will keep an eye on the Q&A section, right? So I can just focus on presenting. Great, thank you very much. Before jumping into actually sharing my screen, so basically today what we're going to do is just to give you a rough agenda on today's plan is that we want to show you as visitors, as attendees, what are the capabilities of AX Semantics to generate and automate in multiple languages. These are not limited to English and German. I think you support over 110 languages currently, right?
Yeah.
And there are quite some fancy languages within that I have never heard of before. But we're going to focus on German and English, as translating or generating two languages is pretty similar to generating 10 or 20 languages, because the concept is the same. And AX Semantics offers multiple methods, and we're going to show these methods one by one based on a project example. This project example, we've implemented that as some more of training purpose at Xanevo, because we teach new employees how to use the software by actually giving them an in-house showcase, in-house example project. And we're going to look at the data that we used, because this is very, very important as well. From the data, we're going to look at the text structure, we're going to look at the actual implementation and the different ways on how to switch between languages and stuff like that. As Nyam already said, just feel free to ask questions in between and afterwards. And then I'll gladly share my screen, all right? So it should be a window. Should be this one. All right, should be seeing my screen right now, or at least my browser window.
We can see it.
And this is the showcase that we've prepared. It says copy shop demo. You should be familiar to a certain extent with the platform. So right now we're already inside of a project. looking at the summary, and from here on we will have a look at the data sources first to give you a feeling of what kind of data are we dealing with here. What's important is whenever you want to generate multiple languages in AX Semantics, it is very important that you create collections, data collections for different languages. You can see on the left-hand side, I have 2 collections prepared already. It says Coffee English and Coffee German. It says coffee because we have created coffee article descriptions. Yeah, it's kind of like product descriptions, but more like drinks that you can buy. And those drinks are consisted of different parameters and attributes. When planning this project, it was very important for us to first think about, I think you can sort of say the base language, because usually you create your logics, you create your transformations, data transformations in a base language first, and then coming from there, you implement the translations for the other languages that you aim to generate as well. So our base language that we chose is English, mainly for the reason that English is usually easier when it comes to sentence structures, when it comes to grammatical aspects. So whenever we switch to another language, we are we have to extend logics instead of changing them or removing them when coming like from a more complex language like Russian and then downgrading back to English. So we start with an easy base language usually. Right here we have 3 example data sets. Usually when automating projects, I mean, you can automatically generate product descriptions or articles in a scale of like 10,000s or hundreds of thousands of text. Right here, this is just a showcase. So we focused on 3 different drinks, espresso, latte macchiato, and cappuccino. You should all be familiar with that. Personally, I'm a huge cappuccino lover. And as you can see here, there are a few different data fields. I'm just going to zoom into it a little bit so you can see them a little bit better. And we have a few rather common attributes and some rather uncommon attributes as well. I'm thinking about product information management systems and databases. Something that is very usual is having a name for the product. It's also having, this is very specific to this project here, the year. So the year, it means where are the origins of the drink, because we have a certain phrase regarding that as well. So country, we have a title that we're using in the text, and a few more specifics are we have the texture of the drink, we have contents, a list of contents, meaning that if we think about cappuccino is not only consisted of coffee or espresso, but also of other ingredients. And then we have some extra variety coming in with combinations. These are food combinations, food recommendations that you could imagine to receive if you're reading a card in a restaurant. For instance, if you're visiting a cafe, and there are also alternative combinations if those first combinations do not fit your taste, as well as a type for those combinations. For instance, people tend to combine espressos with more nutty tastes. Then just to give you another example, the cappuccino dataset has another origin, it's in Vienna, it has another year, it has a little bit more information on the contents, where it says it has coffee and milk, and also a few different other combinations, just to give you a feeling of what the data is composed of. Now, this is the English data set, and of course we have a German data set as well. And what you will notice is when I switch to German and we have a look at espresso, I think we have a good impression of that. First of all, we have the same UID on the left side, which can be relevant for automating. It is beneficial if you use the same IDs for the same products or same articles. Later on, when you want to integrate those descriptions into your website or into any other system. If we look at the Espresso data, you can see here that most of the contents is still written in English. There are a few translations already inserted here, so we're already having a small heads up in methods on how to translate. One of the methods is to actually insert translated contents into your database. So as you can see here is the title changes. It has in capital E because Espresso in German is always written capital, names are written capital. Also the same with the origin, Italy, Italian in German. And then most of the rest is also in English. We have the text that is translated. We have the alternative combinations that are translated as well. The reason behind that is that we used both on-the-fly translations that are done by the engine, and we've also used translations which are already inserted into the data. So these combinations here are already translated, so we can insert them into our text. And these expressions here are not translated yet, just to show you how you can use translations within the engine, within the software, without switching up your data beforehand. All right, so much about the data. From that, let's have a look at the actual results that are being generated from them. Personally, I like to be in the composer and on the review tab to look at those results. They have to be careful if you use the reviews to change the preview language to the actual language that you're expecting to generate with your data set. So if we wanted to look at an English text, we would choose the preview language English and then choose Espresso, for instance. Again, I'm going to zoom into it so you can see here. The article description is split into, I think, 5 different segments, 5 sentences. So what you have here is a title. This is an own statement in the right section. And then we have 5 different sentences. There is an introduction that says, our espresso is mild and creamy at the first sip. It is known to be the best method for bringing out the wonderful taste and aroma of the coffee. Then we have something regarding the origin of the name of the drink. So espresso is an explanation from where the actual name comes from, where the origin is. It is in Italy. And then there are food recommendations or combination recommendations. Which food could you order in combination with espresso, which could be very cool to personally address your customers. For instance, if you have a restaurant or a cafe. Good part here is we can press the regenerate button and the text is actually going to change. A few of those segments are static, a few of those are dynamic. If we regenerate again, you will see that especially the food recommendations at the end, they change a little bit. But yeah, we will look at those single sentences later on. The composition of the sentence is basically an introduction, something about the taste and the origin, and then food combinations. If we want to switch to the German text, as I said before, we have to switch to German, and then we also have to choose a German data object as well. We inserted annotations into the name field of the data object, so we have it easier to differentiate between English and German data sets. If I choose this one, it says here it is in German, which is basically the same sentence structure where we come from a short introduction, have something on the taste, on the origin, and then also how we should combine it. So it says here with glazed donuts in German and also with cheesecake. That's a good combination for espresso, for instance. All right. So now you've seen that we can switch to preview language and we can switch the data sets accordingly. If I chose one of the English data sets here, let's say English espresso, it is still going to generate because most of the logic does work with the data set here, because the data field names, they are still the same. They do not change. We're always trying to keep them to keep the same naming conventions, because then we can just switch out different articles. But what you will see is that there are a few mix-ups in there. For instance, it says here, gut passt auf, so it means it goes well with nut tarts and pistachio muffins, which is of course the English parts of the alternative combinations here that are inserted into the text. So basically, if you have one preview language and a data set of another language, it is not going to work as intended. It's just going to insert the expressions differently. How we structured the story is, as you can see here in the following, we just have one main story here, and you can see that the text output is composed of 6 different statements. Statements are things to use in the right section, right? And there you have a title, which is simply the title. And as I said, there's an introduction, which can be about the flavor, which can also be a general introduction. There's the origin. So where does the name of the drink origin from which country, from which year? And then there's the general combinations and the alternatives that you can eat with this drink that you have. We're going to pick out a few of those statements in order to look at them in more detail, to see first what are they composed of, right? What kind of containers and triggers do we use? And also what kind of statements, triggers do we use, and how can we implement them for 2 languages? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the right section, and we're going to look at the base language first, as this does make a little bit more sense. You should be familiar with the section. Something that you might not necessarily know is that there are statement triggers. You can see it from this small tick right here, which is basically a trigger on a statement level, which says, okay, you should generate this sentence or not. There should be a data set, for instance, latte macchiato, that does not have any alternative combinations. This is why this sentence is not being triggered or is being deactivated, as you can see here. We picked out a few of those sentences that we can look at a little bit in more detail. For instance, let's start with the general introduction. General introduction is something that is always generated. As you can see here, it says always triggered, and the introduction flavor is just sometimes triggered. It says here activated by trigger introduction flavor, meaning that if there is no flavor information, this statement is not being generated. Right here, this is just some classic information, some overview that you should know if you've already worked with AX Semantics. We have a container here that contains the title of the variable. Of course, for the German text, this is going to switch as latte macchiato is written with capital letters in German. Just to see this really quickly, if I switch here, you can see here unser latte macchiato, and so on and so on. So we just have a branch here that differs between is mild and cream or has a splash of milk. For this specific drink, this will just change with a 50-50% chance. And then further in back, it looks a little bit chaotic at first, but basically what this does is there is a trigger for contents, meaning that if the drink has certain contents, I think it was, this is not triggered if we have an espresso, because an espresso does not have any other contents besides espresso. But if we have a cappuccino, this part is generated, which will just say that, well, there's some information, the flavor, which is generated if espresso is one of the contents of your drink. And this one down below is generated if there is no espresso within your drink. Exactly. So what is being done here? So we can jump into the transform section to have a quick look at how this introduction generally is implemented. We'll have a look at the title. This is not too spectacular. And we'll also have a look at this variable, which is actually more interesting, because this one, as the variable name annotates, is using a lookup table in AX Semantics, which is one of the other methods on how to generate multilingual outputs. So in the transform section, well, this is this is tidy and neat. So we basically just insert one subgraph per statement that we have in write section. You can see here we have 6 subgraphs, and there are also 6 write statements in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And each of the respective names here is being used here as well, meaning that if we want to have more information, or if we want to see how the introduction general is implemented, we just have to enter this graph and look at the contents here. So please do not feel overwhelmed here. I will explain from left to right what we're basically doing using here. You've seen the branch before that uses the trigger contents. And this trigger contents, what it does is it checks whether coffee or espresso is contained within the contents, which means if that happens, if that is the case, I want to display or generate a text that says, okay, my drink does contain coffee, my drink does contain espresso, hence has a more distinct or strong taste, right? If we have like some drink, for instance, a tea, matcha tea, for instance, it does not contain coffee or espresso, hence it does not have a strong or distinct taste or not a bitter taste. So this is just to trigger a sentence or phrase that says that the drink might be strong or bitter. If this trigger is activated, right, if we look at this again, we have this trigger here. If this trigger is activated, we have this container in here that is being used. It says lookup filtered contents. We want to have a look at this to see how this is implemented. Basically, from this contents table, what we can get is just a list of different contents. Here we have espresso and milk. If we switch the preview test object from latte macchiato to espresso, it should just contain espresso, right? You can see here the previous switches to espresso. If we change to cappuccino, it should have the contents milk and coffee. Exactly, coffee and milk in this order. And what we want to do here is to filter out or to get those contents that are either coffee or espresso. This is something that is rather easy in English. And this is why we use this lookup table here. For those who have not used the lookup table yet, it basically looks at a list or at a single element. If it is contained in the lookup table, it is translated to another expression. So if we look into this lookup table, we have keys. This is what we're looking for in the lookup table. This is what we're asking for. For instance, if we input espresso from an English data set, you can see here the language is chosen here. It says English, United Kingdom. This is not very spectacular, but we have to do this. Why is it not spectacular? Basically, what it says is if one of the keys that are put in, or one of the requested elements in the list is espresso, translated to espresso. If one of the contents is coffee, translated to coffee. So very unspectacular. The interesting part here is that if any other content is being passed in, and we use the function accordingly, you can look up this function get in the AX documentation. Basically, what we can do with the last parameter is say, if one of the contents that we're providing is not in the lookup table, just remove it or give back in an empty element. Meaning that if we input coffee and milk here, you can certainly see here that there are 2 return values. It is phrase 16. So phrase 16 is the translation of coffee. And there's an empty string as well, which is basically because milk is not part of this lookup table. So this is for the general understanding about how we're using this lookup table. Now you might ask yourselves, okay, what does this have to do with translations and multilingual content? Well, basically what you can do with lookup tables is you can insert different languages here. You have the option, and this is also with phrase nodes as well that we will see later. So you can choose the option all, which is empty here because we do not want an output for any language. We want to have specific outputs for specific languages. So here, unspectacular, espresso translates to espresso. But then if we move to German and choose this, you can see a slight difference. Basically, if the key espresso is used as an input, We can insert the output espresso with a capital E, so this is the German translation. We also have like Kaffee as German translation to coffee right here. Yeah, why are we doing this? Basically, the main advantage of doing this right here is that you can keep your master data in one language. You can say, I want to keep my master data in English, for instance, and you just juggle and with English expressions, you juggle with English data, you transform English data, and we can use English inputs here and get an output of any other language that we've configured in our project, meaning that if we have 10 different collections for 10 different languages, we have the option to generate 10 different language outputs for just the one language input on which we build the logics of our project. In order to generate the German equivalent here, of course, we would have to switch the preview language to German as well. Let's do that real quick. As you can see here, it says, okay, we have coffee and milk. If we switch to German and the German data set for cappuccino, you can see that nothing changes with the contents. And this is very important. The contents do not change at all. And the lookup table is still the same as before. The only detail that changes is that German is being automatically selected as the language of choice because the preview language is in German. This is then packed into a group and then passed onto the variable in the right section. Basically, if I switch to the right section right now for preview, you're going to see here we have the German text, of course, and here it says Kaffee instead of coffee. If we switch to English again, it says coffee. If we switch to German, it says Kaffee, basically because the preview language here steers whether we're using English or German for the lookup tables or any other part of the project where any sort of language is pre-configured. All right, so this has been one of the methods on how to translate languages within AX Semantics using the engine. So far, we've seen the option to configure the data to have translations within our data. Right now, we've seen how to use lookup tables in order to do translations. And what I've already teased and promised you is that we're also looking at phrase nodes and how to use them to translate between different languages. Let me check real quick where we have those phrases. We have the sentence called origin. The sentence origin, let's have a look at it in English. It says cappuccinos look very similar to the robes of the Capuchin monks. That's where the name comes from. This is one container named phrase origin, which is quite long because the phrase variables that we use, these are usually parts of a sentence or whole sentences. You're very flexible when it comes to choosing, do you want to use phrase nodes for just a word or maybe a noun and an adjective or even whole sentences. And then back there, it says the origin can be traced back to, right now this says Wien, which is the German equivalent for Vienna. Right here, we have the translation embedded in the data. So if we switch to English cappuccino, it translates to Vienna again. And also the year 1901. So this is just a 50-50 where it switches between the location and the temporal origin. And what's going to be important and what's going to be new is we're going to have a look at this phrase origin and how this is implemented so we can switch between languages. Just to give you a feeling, if we switch to German right here, it says, Cappuccinos sehen den Gewändern der Kapuzinermönche sehr ähnlich. So the Kapuzinermönche is the Capuchin monks. Woher auch der Name kommt means where the name comes from. And the translation is also done by changing the preview language, just as we did before with the lookup tables. All right, so statement origin, we jump to the transform section, we go to the project root and we select the subgraph that says origin. And then we're going to look for the variable that contains the phrase. So this is this one here. And this one here is very specific. Sometimes when using nodes gets a little bit tedious because you have a lot of nodes and the project kind of blows up and you have a lot of nodes just spread across your project or your current layer. We just use subgraphs to sort of package them into a smaller module, meaning that we have an input here, which goes into the phrase origin. And then in there, we are generating the phrase, which is then passed out to the variable that we're using in the right section again. You can also see here that it says phrase origin cappuccino is being generated. If we switch to espresso, it says here phrase origin espresso. And also latte macchiato, respectively, is going to be phrase origin latte macchiato. This is because, and you will see it right now if I jump into the subgraph, this is because those phrase nodes here that we're using, they have the name phrase origin and then the respective drink name. So what we've done here is we created one phrase node for each and every of the drinks or articles that are available that you can buy in the coffee store or in the cafe. And what you can also see is that there are certain logics, certain conditions beforehand that control whether those phrases are being activated or not, meaning if there is a green dot, the phrase origin latte macchiato is being activated. And you can also see here that latte macchiato is being the only phrase that is passed into this group. So one main thing again is we're having the data in English. What we're using here is we're checking whether cappuccino is in the name of our product or whether espresso is in the name of our product or latte macchiato is in the name of our product to steer which one of these phrases is being generated. As I mentioned before, this means we do not have to program 3 different conditions for each and every language. If we didn't manage this accordingly, and we had different names for our different data sets, meaning that once we have cappuccino written without capital letter, and for the German language, if we have like cappuccino written with a capital C, we would have to use more logic nodes, more conditions to control the language outputs. And here it is kept simple. If we use German, as you can see here, we switch to German latte macchiato. This is still green because the input that is passed in is also the English expression, even though we're using the German dataset. So with that, you should be able to understand how these phrases are triggered or enabled or disabled. Let's have a look at the espresso example. I think this is the easiest usually. The espresso example here is activated, and then we can have a look at the phrase and what's done here. So first thing that you can use phrase that you probably know is you can have multiple variants by just adding or removing a phrase. So I can just add something here, type something in. I can use them for containers and branchings, just as we would be doing that in the right section. I can also remove them, meaning that these phrases here, these are basically, well, one big branch where it just randomly chooses which one of these outputs is being used. Then besides that, we also have a language selector as well, just like with the lookup tables, where we can choose between all languages. You can see here it's empty. We usually pay attention that we always create phrases for the respective language in which we're creating the project, because otherwise, if we created, for instance, the base language in this part, we would have to move them to English and then create the German translations on top of that. Then we have the English text. So right here, just to give you an impression of what's in there, it says espresso was coined from the Italian word esprimere, which means to press out or to express, right? Espresso is a drink that you press out. And if we switch to German right here, it's going to say Espresso wurde vom italienischen Wort esprimere abgeleitet, was auspressen oder ausdrucken bedeutet. This is just the German equivalent, or the translation of what we have in English, and also another variant here, which which is the same message, just written a little bit different. The way these phrase translations work is basically exactly the same as those from the lookup tables work, meaning that if our preview language is on English, this phrase node, if activated, is going to provide us the English phrase. If we choose German, it is going to provide us the German result. We can see that in the right section. If we expand this, you've seen it before, right? If I have German as preview language, it's giving us the German text. If I switch to English, obviously it is going to give us the English phrase. One thing that you should be careful here, and what we always recommend our customers, I think you do the same, Pachi and Nyam, is that you never create those phrase nodes and use the language all, because our recommendation is to always use the specific language, because all, I think this is the output that is being generated if there is no respective output in the chosen preview language. For instance, if we had like some example in here and we had English, if there is an input in for the English language, the preview language is English, it is going to prefer this over the all output. If we switch to German, German is empty, it is going to output this. And when managing your multilingual projects, it is generally more advisable to remove the all outputs. There are a few rare scenarios where you would insert something into all, because perhaps city names might be the same throughout several languages and might be different in one specific language. So what I could do here is for instance, if a lot of languages use Vienna as the main or as the name for Vienna in English or perhaps in other languages, and there's a different name in German specifically, I can say, okay, this is Wien in German, and I just leave out the English variant. So if I have the preview language English, it is going to insert Vienna for the English text.
Right, it's more like a default. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a default that can be overwritten by the other languages. All right, I think we have seen the different methods. In total, we have 4 different methods on how we can generate multiple languages. The first method that we have seen is in the data sources, where we can insert translations in different languages already inside of the data. For instance, in the texture, we have leicht and cremig, which translates to light and creamy in English. This is method, let's say method 1. Then there's the second method in the right section, where we can manually write German and English text outputs. So if we switch to English, obviously these parts that do not depend on any containers or triggers or stuff like that, these are handwritten and these are translations. This is basically method 2. And then we've seen the lookup tables and the phrase nodes, where we can insert different languages also by switching the preview language. So in total we have, I think in total we have 4 different methods to switch between languages to generate different language output. Then we can also choose here in the results, for instance, if we have the collection data English, if you press this generate all button, it is going to, you know the screen perhaps, is going to generate the result in English. And if we're on the coffee German collection and we say generate all, it is going to generate the German results respectively.
Right. Maybe we can just show very quickly an example if we add a new language.
Yeah, of course.
So we just go, right.
Okay, so what we would do is, or basically what we usually do is, if the data set is small, we just copy the data. Then we say we want to have a new collection. Let's say coffee Spanish, since you're here, Pachi.
Yeah.
We have to configure this as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so reset, first step, project settings, we go into languages, and then there we can add project languages. So let's say we have Spanish. Any preference here? Spain?
I'm from Spain,
perhaps?
so.
Then let's choose this. Is going to be added to the project languages. We can also remove them here as well. Then from that, if the project language is added, we can create a new collection based on that. So we have copy Spanish. We choose Spanish, say create new collection, and then we can start importing data. For instance, if I pasted this in here and then yeah, I could do a few adjustments here. So for instance, the texture here I could translate, or what should we pick out? Let's go with the origin, Pachi. How about that?
Oh, okay.
So we could change the Italia like this, right?
Yes.
And then this should already be enough to switch between the languages. So if we press start upload, you can see in the collection we have the Espresso. I didn't change the name here, so it would just be changing the name here. We can add this as test object. We go to the composer, we choose the new Espresso data set, go to the statement origin, and then if we switch to Spanish, it is obviously empty. Would have to insert that, of course. Okay, so the way to go would be usually we just pick the main language, and we copy paste what we have in here. We go to Spanish, insert it here, and then from there we can edit the different content. So for instance here, we could insert the Spanish translation here as well. The year is already taken from the data, and what you can see here is that Italia is also taken from the data set, of course, which we already translated within our data set. Yeah. And then, of course, this is not generating any output because we do not have any Spanish variant implemented. That we would have to do as well. If we jumped to phrase Espresso, we could go to Spanish. And if we added test output here just for showcasing purposes, went back to write, it would be in here. You can see here it says test output, and the origin can be traced back to Italia.
One thing I would like to show, if you could go to the preview test objects,
of course,
and then configure test objects, right?
Of course.
So we have this one new collection with the Spanish data, and here you can also edit the name. So you can change this one to ES, for example. Or, So for testing purpose, you can also change the name here and easily differentiate between the languages of the test objects. So you don't have to insert this in the data.
Yeah. So basically, that's a nice addition. So we could leave this name on Espresso without any language language abbreviation and just change it here.
Yeah, which is usually common if you have products. You don't have to add this additionally to your data then.
Perfect. So cool. These have been the different methods, right, on how to switch languages, translate languages. We've seen 4 methods. And for those who just want to try out and see this in action, there's also a demo website that we're currently having, which is coffeeshopdemo.com. It is purely used for showcases right now that we usually present to potential customers or people who are interested in how we can generate multilingual content. And what this website does is it accesses the text results from AX Semantics. It's currently programmed for German and English. And here, if you scroll down to drinks or use this button here, it is just, it shows you a few different pictures. This title, and this title, they are all pulled from AX Semantics. So if we look at one of the reviews here, let's say English for Espresso, you can see here this title Espresso is being inserted here. It is also inserted here. And the text down here is basically the output that is generated here in this part. And what we've done is right here, you can regenerate the text. We've done this a couple of times, and just to give you a pretty similar experience without having your own license or without importing a project, which is not possible yet. So you can press this regenerate button. And as you can see, it is changing based on the triggers and variants that we have implemented in the project. What you can also see here is that you can switch between the languages, right? English and German. We might add more languages in the future, for instance, Spanish, if Pachi shares her translation knowledge with us, right? And you can do this respectively for the other text results as well. You can also regenerate for German outputs. Yeah, so basically, if you want to play around, you can just go into this website. It is going to move to our homepage on Xanevo earlier or later. Yeah.
Okay, so as a quick recap, you can add a new language by importing new data, keep the data in the origin language, go to write, translate the statements, and for translating the values or some phrases, you can use the lookup tables or phrase notes in the transform part. So that's the things that you would have to change. The statements, translating them, lookups, and phrase notes. Just for a quick recap.
Mm-hmm. I think I can add a little bit to that as well. So like the main learnings that I would like to give you for today's webinar are first, what's very important is if you use AX Semantics for generating, let's say, 20 different languages, AX Semantics is very powerful because you just have to code the logic once and not 20 times. This is a huge advantage of our other language generation tools where you would have to implement it 20 times, right? Then another advantage, which is very interesting for big corporations as well when it comes to master data management, is you only have to keep one single point of truth, only one database that contains the base language data, and then using AX Semantics you can implement the translations, and you can also do it while transporting the data using an ETL tool, for instance. So one logic that you have to implement and one database that you need. Only thing that you have to take care of is that sometimes when translating, sentence structures might change, word orders might change. This is something that you have to pay attention on beforehand, and the rest is being handled by AX Semantics, of course. Great.
Cool.
So much from my part.
Yeah. Are there any questions? So there are no questions yet. So this webinar is recorded. It will be all again with you can find it in the webinar section on our documentation part, and we will also add this example project to our example, so you can also have a look at it and play around on your own.
Exactly. So later on, if you go to documentation help here, there's going to be this section that says, oh, it's already here. You can press on the examples. It has a few examples already. I think there is already a multilingual example, right? Is it the product description one?
Not sure.
It says here it is in English and German, right? So there is an example that's already in English and German, and we're going to add the coffee article descriptions as well. So there's going to be another example project that you can import into your license, try it out, play around, and see how we've implemented that on our side, and then adapt it to your own projects. And besides that, Nyam, you already said it, it's being recorded anyway. And if there are questions, I'm pretty sure that Nyam will answer everything in the support chat. And I'm also available if there are any questions afterwards.
All right. Cool. Thanks for your time. Thank you, Jan. Thanks for joining this webinar. And then the next one will be held in German in 2 weeks then.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Pachi.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very explanative.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.